What's up guys, this is Coast here. Just wanted to run through a quick tutorial on how I go about making kicks for like drum and bass, you know, any sort of genre of dance heavy music, whether it be dubstep, techno, trance, any sort of electronic kick that you might want to use a synthesizer to make your kicks. So yeah, I mean, I'll just jump straight into it. If you find the video helpful, hit the like, hit comment and subscribe. You know, drop a message in the bottom. Let me know what you want to see next, and I'll go over those. So yeah, I mean, you can get as simple or as complicated as you want, really. When you're making kicks, I'll start off with a few different techniques. I'll start off with just a basic, simple kick, and then I'll go into, like, you know, how you might get a little bit more complex by adding things like transients and you know, how you might like layer that up with like more live sounding kicks or kicks that you might have in sample packs. So let's get into it. So yeah, just open up Serum. So a kick is basically the tail part of a kick. In fact, it'd be better if I just show you what a kick is, so we can separate it into its different parts. Find a nice kick. So that'll do. So if we actually look at a kick and we analyze it in a couple of different ways, we can split it up into its separate parts over time and frequency. So this could be any kick. The kicks that you get in sample packs are mostly quite processed, quite heavily sort of, you know, distorted, and most of them would have been made inside a synthesizer anyway. So you can see there's a couple of sort of separate parts. If I just kind of show you. So this first part here is, I'll just move this up here. This is what's called the transient, and the transient is basically just a click. It is the thing that sounds, well, just like a click, really. So if I just play that for you a couple of times, there really isn't much to it. It's just almost like noise, and it basically is just a noise. So you can achieve that with, like, you know, white noise or any other sort of style of noise. So that's the transient part, and if you listen to just the transient part, as I say, it's just noise. So if you listen to this kick without this transient part, it doesn't have any punch, it doesn't have any sort of smack. If you were to use this kick without the transient in a tune, you just wouldn't cut through the mix. So this transient part really helps it kind of cut through the rest of the instruments that you might have going on. So I just play it with and without the transients. This is without. This is with. And if you're listening on good headphones or good speakers, you definitely tell a difference between the two. We've analysed that first part, and it is just a click. Second part to analyse is what is going on with the actual wave itself. So essentially, with all kicks, you have a pitch drop. Now I can show you this in Spectrum, maybe in Spectrum. So you can see this part here happens after this part here, and the reason that that's happening is because it's starting quite high up. When the kick first initially hits, it's doing like a pitch drop, so it starts high in the frequency range and then goes down low, and you can see that it starts here and it goes down, and then shortly after the transient you see this pop up. So you'll see all this start, and then this will happen afterwards. So watch closely and you'll see it. It was doing, it's like whoop whoop. It's not instant. This bit happens after this bit, and that is basically a pitch pitch drop. So it's starting high in pitch, and it's doing something like this. So if you imagine this is the start of the sound, and the pitch is basically going down like that. Very simple way to sort of show you is what happens with like an 808 like a sub bass. We all know that 808, like boom, like that sub bass sort of 808 sound. And you can achieve that just by adding LFO1 to the pitch. At the moment, it's set to go both ways. So if you look in the matrix, you see this. There's an arrow going left and an arrow going right. That basically means that it's bipolar. Now an 808 doesn't move bipolar. It doesn't go whoa. It goes ooh. So that's going one way. If it was going whoa, that would be bipolar. It's starting low, going high, and then going back low again. So I'll show you this. If I sort of go up 24 semitones. 4 is just easy if I click it. 24. And then we set this to trigger every time because we want the same thing to play every single time we play it. If it's on off mode, it will start anywhere. It could start here, it could start here, it could start here every time you hit a key. We don't want that. We want it to start the same place every single time we hit the key. So that's why we put it on trigger or envelope mode. I'm going to use trigger. So you will see the highest point. As I say, I need to change this to one way, so it's going one way. Let's go in Serum. Turn that on. That's what it's doing. If I put it on envelope mode, it will just do it once. I'm just holding the key and I'm holding it down. So it starts high, gets low. That is effectively the same thing as what we were talking about here with the kick. It starts high and gets low. This is on a much longer time frame. So if you wanted to get a kick doing more of a kind of it works a lot quicker. I can simulate that by turning BPM off and just kind of adjusting the rate. If I go this way, it gets longer. So an 808 sub bass will be doing. That's basically what we're doing. But a kick is doing exactly the same thing. It's just doing it a lot quicker. So obviously going this way makes it slower. If I turn it up, you can hear that. If I turn the volume up a bit as well, you see it's without it. That's without it. That's with it. So that's already starting to sound like a kick. We've already got that part there. But we're still missing the transient part. As I said, we discussed this transient part. What we're talking about now is the kind of the pitch drop, which happens over the whole sample. And you can actually see it in any given kick waveform. You see this part of the waveform. It's going up and down a lot faster than it is over here. So this oscillation is happening a lot faster than this oscillation. So yeah, I mean that's basically what kick does. It starts high in pitch and goes low in pitch. The next thing to notice about this particular kick, and pretty much all kicks that you get in sample packs, is there's not any distortion going on. There's not any clipping going on. It's a pure sine wave, similar to Serum. And if I bring up an oscilloscope, and I just play a sine wave, you'll see it's just a sine wave. It's going up and down. And sine wave is the most pure tone. If you don't know the difference between sort of square waves, sine waves, saw waves, pulse waves, all that sort of stuff, I recommend there's some good videos on YouTube. I recommend going and watch those. So yeah, that's a sine wave. But what we can see in this kick and pretty much all other kicks is that it's not clipping, it's not cut off at the top. So this sine is very pure. Now when you start adding things like distortion and clipping and stuff, what you're effectively going to do is you're going to chop I'm going to chop these bits up so it's going to go, start at the 0 point, it's going to go down, and it's going to get chopped off by whatever clipping or limiting you have going on. And I can show you that now with a hard clipper. I'm the wrong one. I want it on Serum. So if I put this hard clipper and I set it to hard clip mode, which is effectively what limiters are doing, so like Pro Hour, they've all got a hard clipper built into them. So that's, you know, all pretty much modern limiters have some hard clipping going on. If I start to drive this signal, you'll see, if I can turn it up a bit, as I start to add some drive, let's get the volume coming out of Serum as pretty much as loud as we can get it. That's loud. So if we start to add some drive on this, what you're going to see is these waveforms are going to start to get squared off at the top. So let's show you that in practice now. If I have to turn this down. There's two things to notice here. One is that the sine wave is pretty much exactly the same as it was before, except for these bits, because that's the point. You can see 0 dB, anything that goes over 0 dB, because I'm driving it so much, is going to get cut off, it's going to get squared off at the top. Now that does two things. It makes the waveform look a little bit like it's been squared off, and it also changes the harmonics. It adds frequency content that didn't exist to the pure sine wave before. And you can see that in a spectrum. It's added all of these harmonics, whereas before it was a pure sine wave. Now it's started to add these extra harmonics, which we don't want. We don't want that in a kick. We want our kicks, as we can see, there's no squaring going off on these sorts of kicks. And I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that in order to have a powerful kick that cuts through, you need the transient. In order to make it sound like an actual kick and to have that kind of body and that subby kind of sort of pure sine wave, you can't drive it too much. You can't have it absolutely wrecked. And that's a problem that I hear with a lot of producers, is that they'll take a kick and they'll start to distort it, they'll start to limit it. Or maybe at the end of the processing chain, maybe they have some, you know, they're doing some limiting on the master or something like that. And basically this is what's happening to their kick. You can see, you can hear how it's changed the tone. You can see that it's kind of done this, squared off, and you don't see that in samples that are professionally produced. They're all pretty much, they've got a very nice, very pure sort of sine wave going on. So that's definitely one thing to bear in mind. You don't want to clip it too hard, you don't want to distort it too hard. You can distort the start, like the transient. As I said, that's just noise. That doesn't matter. That can be clipped. And in a lot of cases, it actually is. In this case, it hasn't really been clipped, otherwise you'd see it. But since it's just noise, and for the duration of time that it happens, it's so short. Like, how short is this? I put it to the start. You can actually see the transient only lasts for less than 2 milliseconds. Well, between like 3 milliseconds. And the human ear just doesn't pick that up. So you can distort that and rag that as heavily as you want. And because it's so small, because it's so short, the human ear just won't discern it as audible distortion. But if you do it to the body of the kick, then yeah, the human ear will pick up that it sounds distorted and it sounds rubbish. So that's two things we want to know about. We want to keep our sub part of the kick in check. We want that to still be subby. We don't want to cut it off. We also want the transient to be nice and clicky, so it helps cut through the start of the mix. And we also want the sound to start high in pitch and go low, as we were talking about with the example here, where it goes boom, like that. That's essentially the three parts of a kick that that you kind of need to bear in mind when you're designing kicks. So that's kind of the theory out of the way. So let's actually start to use some of this in practice, so we can actually start to make our own kicks, and then we won't ever have to buy samples again, because we could just make our own. So one thing a lot of producers like to do is they like to make their kicks and their snares in tune. There's a number of reasons for this. One is that it's in tune with the key of the song. You don't have to tune every single kick that you use, but it is becoming more and more popular, and it does have its benefits. It won't sound out of key with the rest of the instruments. The second reason why you kind of want to use synthesizers to make your kicks is that you have a lot more control over all of the different aspects, and you can also have it in the frequency range that you want. So a big part of production is kind of putting things together a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. If I get a spectrum up, so you've got to kind of look at this whole frequency range as kind of like a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, and each piece needs to be filled in. So obviously from around sort of, let's say 60, 70, 80 hertz downwards, this area here is only going to be dedicated to the kick, the low part of the kick, and the sub bass. So we don't want any other information in this area at all. Only the kick and only the sub bass. And ideally, you don't want both of them playing at the same time. If you want a loud mix, you can't have your subby part of your kick layered up with your subby part of your sub bass. Otherwise, you're just going to get a massive peak in volume, and that's going to make getting competitive loudness really difficult later down the line. Because if you add two signals together and they're both in the same frequency, then they're going to multiply and they're going to come across as louder. So one reason why you want to kind of design your own kicks so you can have them set to whatever key you want is, let's say your sub bass is sitting in this range here. You can have your kick sitting next to it, like I said, like a jigsaw puzzle, just here. So sub bass is occupying this region, the kick's occupying this region, and then that's this whole sub 100 area taken care of. So yeah, if you can, they're not going to be fighting for space as much, is what I'm trying to say. They won't be fighting for space. So your sub bass is in this area, it kicks over here, which is good because they've both got their own little space, their own little space in the mix. Then of course, as you move up to this area, a lot of instruments take up this kind of 200 to 400 to 500 area. So you need to be careful about mixing, but that's mixing. That's a whole other subject. And then of course you've got your snare that's going to be peaking, around here or up here, or depending on the sort of style that you're going for or the genre. Snares will be, generally in this kind of area, and then you've got your hats being taken care of in this area, and then that's your whole jigsaw puzzle filled up with your drums. You're covering all the spectrum, with a kick, a snare, or a clap or something, and maybe some percussion-y instruments, and then your hats. So that's a reason why you want to kind of use synthesized kicks. So let's start to make some. So for argument's sake, I'm going to make this kick in G. So let's just start by getting in a simple kick pattern. I'll use drum and bass as this kind of example. So let's get down a simple where a kick would be in a typical drum and bass arrangement. So that's typically where you would find a kick. In 90% of drum and bass tunes, it'll be dooch, 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 dooch. So we're doing that here. And then we want to open up Serum. And I'll just initialize this. So we're starting with a blank, a blank sort of template. So as I said before, we're working with a sine wave, the kick, as you can see from all of these samples. If you look down here, they've all got that sine wave. You don't really want to use triangle waves. You don't really want to use square waves. Typically for a kick, you want to keep it as a sine wave. So that'll be the first thing. To draw a sine wave in Serum is very simple. You just do that. Nice and easy. So that's the first part done. So let's shorten up this because this is a little bit long for a kick. And in fact, if you want to take a look at how long an average kick lasts, you can just drag in any old kick. And you can say, okay, this is how long the kick lasts. So I will do the same thing with my kick. I will have it there. So it's kind of using this kick, a kick that I like from a sample pack that I like, as a reference. So I've just matched the same sort of length. So get rid of that now. So we've got our sine wave. Sounds shit. So let's make it sound a bit better. So as I said, the first part is to get the pitch drop. And we can do that, as I said earlier, we need to be in either trig or envelope mode. Let's go with trig mode. And we want it to start high up the frequency and go low. So we want a kind of a ramp down. Starts high, goes low, right? And then we want to assign this to the pitch. So I would just drag and drop that and assign it onto the pitch. Now, those who have a keen eye will see that it is in the bipolar mode. We need to change that to unipolar. So we just go over to matrix and click it so it's only going one way. So let's have a listen to that. And up a bit. Okay, basically it. We need to make a few changes. So obviously this is a lot higher, too high for a kick. So we need to start to bring the octave down. Okay, that's good. So I haven't set the value for this. So plus 24 can be quite a good kind of high starting point to go low, or you can go higher. Let's hear how this sounds at plus 24. Quite nice, but we don't have that click. We don't have that the initial transient. We don't have the kind of the pitch drop that high. So let's put it up to 36. Boom. It's easier if I double click it. That's a bit better. Let's try 48. A bit high, but let's start to shape the actual kick. We can always turn this back down to 36 if we want to later. So obviously this pitch drop's going on for too long. So let's turn the BPM off and let's use the rate to really dial in how quickly we want that pitch to drop from the high point to the low point. This is in trig mode, so when it gets to the end of this, it's going to restart. So I'm going to put it in envelope mode because when it gets to the end, it will just stop. It won't carry on. In trig mode, when it gets to the end, when it gets to this point here, it will start to play this again. So that's why you're going to hear this. It goes down and then it peaks again. That's why you get that little click at the end of it. If I put that to envelope mode, you will get rid of that end of the click. Okay, whilst I've remembered it, one thing to remember is this random knob. This random knob basically means that if it's 100%, this phase is going to, when I play the kick one time, it might start here. When the kick plays on this part, it might start over here, and it's just going to change where it starts every single time. So in order to get around that, I just put the random to 0, and I put the phase to 0 as well. That means every time that this kick is triggered, it's going to start here, and it's going to go to the end of the sample. So, okay, so again, let's go back to the rate, and let's start to fine tune this until we've got the pitch sound, the pitch drop that we want. Okay, now I think that is actually a bit high, so let's take this back down to 36. Sounding good. The next thing we want to do is we want to shape it, because if you look at these kicks, it's quite sort of steady here, but then it slows down a lot here. The distance between the waveforms, the oscillations, the hertz, is happening at a slower rate down here than it is up here. So we can emulate that in Serum just by changing the shape of this. So, and just maybe adding in a few points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with the shape and also play around with the rate until I've got a sound that I'm comfortable with as a kick. It can also be helpful to add in a spectrum to see what kind of frequencies you're hitting. So let's have a look on that. And that's way, way too low for a kick. So what are we getting? 25 hertz? For a drum and bass kick, we don't want it going down that low. So I'm just going to turn the octave up to -3. That looks okay. Maybe another one. It's -2. Okay, now let's start tweaking the rate. Okay, so you can hear it's kind of added its own like little knock. It's like kind of added in its own like little click, almost like a transient at the start of the sample because of the speed at which it starts here and gets to here. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to shape the overall volume of the actual kick itself, and we're going to use a LFO2 again in trigger or envelope mode. I'll use envelope mode. And this is just going to control the volume of the kick. So we can sculpt. So this envelope is sculpting how the pitch acts to the sound. This envelope is going to control how the volume acts. So I can shape the sound so it does something more like this kick. You can see it's a lot. It's not only less oscillations on this part, it's also a lot quieter on this section as it is over here. So let's try and do that now. So I'm just going to assign LFO2 to the level. I'll turn the level all the way down. I'll turn this all the way up. And a very similar sort of shape as what we've got going on LFO1. We're just going to drag this over here. I'm going to turn the BPM off. And I'm going to try and sculpt the actual volume of the kick. Sounds right, but I think this kick could do with being a little bit lower. So I might change it from a G to say an F. Okay, so let's start tweaking the pitch again to try and get that a little bit tighter. The LFO1 is for the pitch. Maybe go back into the matrix and start adjusting the pitch. And let's go back to the volume shaping, and let's try and shape it a little bit better there. Turn it down a few keys. Have a look on Spectrum. Looking alright, sounded a lot better. Still missing quite a few things though. If I bring up scope, let's have a look at this waveform and compare it to, say, one of the kicks in our samples. So we've got that nice subby sort of sound that we want to keep. We've got this kind of nice trailing off as the same as we've got in any given kick. Maybe not that one. It's pretty hard all the way throughout. That one, I think. Yeah, we've got a similar kind of volume decrease as the sample goes on. Maybe we could add in a little bit extra volume decrease, so this part here isn't as loud as this part here. That's a bit better. We might have gone a little bit too much, so we can just dial that back a little bit. Maybe extend that. Turn it up a little bit more. That looks alright, it sounds okay. So what else can we do from here? Well, the transient part that we spoke about at the start, this part, we can actually start to add that in with oscillator B. Or a noise. Let's use a noise for now as to act as the transient part. So I'll turn this oscillator off in a minute. And standard noise. So we want this LFO to control, as we said in the beginning, the transient only lasts for what, 2 to 4 milliseconds. So it's really, really short. So we want to emulate that by using an envelope, an LFO to control the level, just to get that kind of clicky transient that we heard in the other sample. And same as before, we'll just put it on envelope mode. We'll turn the BPM off and we use the rate and adjust this to get a very tight clicky sound that we can then blend into oscillator A. So that's it as it is normally. Maybe change the pitch. I just turned on these two buttons. Have a listen how that sounds with the kick, and we might flick through some different noise samples. It's a bit too long. I think it's a bit too loud, so we can turn it down a bit. Maybe still a bit too long. Let's try and put in a tiny note there and do something like this. So the noise by itself, almost nothing, but then the transient that we looked at earlier was almost nothing as well. So that's the noise, the kick by itself, both together. Then I'm on and off. So that's one way of getting a an actual transient itself. What I will do is I will remove all this. One thing that I do personally that I like, that I will share with you now, is I basically went into all of the kick samples that I like and I lined them all up one by one, and then I took all of the transients, I just deleted everything, and then I went through and exported each one of these kick transients. I added a little fade, otherwise there's going to be pops and clicks, but yeah, basically I exported each and every transient sample like that and I put them in my Serum folder. So when I go to the noise, I go to user and I go to sampled kick transients, I've got a whole bunch of actual kick transient samples from other kicks that I like that I can use as transients for my kick. So I'll just listen to a few of those now. Get rid of that, we don't need it. So that's just the noise playing a transient that I have exported myself. So I can use this LFO that I was using for the noise, I can assign that to these transients. And I can start to skip through these transient samples with the kick that I've designed in order to find a nice transient that works well with this, this waveform for the body of the kick. That's quite nice. So I'll use that one and I'll just shape it a little bit. So that sounds quite cool. One thing that you will notice with a lot of kicks as well, when you're looking at them on the sample pack, maybe not this one. I'll find a good example. Maybe this one. So it doesn't start all subby. It doesn't start with that body of the kick. It doesn't start with this oscillator A. It actually starts with the transient, and then the body of the sound starts to come in just after the end of the transient. So that's the transient sound, which would be the equivalent to this. And the body of the kick, the oscillations, the sine wave, doesn't actually start like it's not going up and down here. that's just transient. That's all that is. There's no real sub in this section here. So we can copy that by just adding a little bit of an attack to the start of oscillator A. So let's do that now. So that's the pitch. We want to keep that as it is. Oscillator 2 was the level. So we just want to add a little bit of attack to the level to emulate what we saw with this kick. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to allow the transient to start first, and it's going to give that a little bit of room to breathe. And after that's been playing for a couple of milliseconds, oscillator A is going to come in. So I'll just add a little bit of attack whilst listening to it. And that's just given our transient a little bit of room to breathe. So I'll play it with and without it. So this is as it was before. And this is as it is after. I think it just sounds a little bit cleaner. So yeah, that's basically a kick there. Looking at it on scope, you can see that we can actually get away with some distortion and some clipping on this kick, because the clipping will act upon the point that you set it on. So if I set it to this 0.3, if I set this saturator, where is it? So if I set this saturator to 3 decibels of drive, as long as it's coming out at 0 dB, as long as it's coming out of Serum at bang on 0 dB, if I add 3 dB of drive, then this is going to get shaved off. And as we spoke about before, these are so short, these like little clicks and pops are so short, the human ear won't detect it as distortion. So we can actually drive this, but you don't want to drive it too much, so that you start squaring off the waveform, which is what I was talking about earlier. So I'm just going to add a little bit of, actually first of all, what I might do is you can get away with just a little bit of saturation. I like to use tape saturation. It adds a nice like sound. It kind of ties in the transient and the body of the kick together. So I'll just use trash for that, and I'll use some tape saturation with about 2 dB of drive, maybe a little boost here. And it's not really going to affect the harmonics. It's not going to square them off, but it is going to add some nice tape saturation to the sound. Limiter off. Okay, so we're driving that too hard into trash. It's got like 7 dB. So I'm going to back off the master a little bit. That'll do. So just to make sure we're not squaring off the waveform, I'll unfreeze it and look at it whilst I make the changes. See, that's too much there. If I drive it, now I listen to a lot of producers' tunes, and that's how their kick sounds. And basically what they've done is they've just fucking chopped off like the whole thing, which gives you a nice fat squarey kick, but you've lost all of the sub bass in your kick. You've lost all of that weight. So we don't want to go that hard, but we can add a little bit. So let's just start to add a little bit until we see that we've got a little bit of saturation going on, but not squaring off the sine wave. Looks quite good. So you can see we've still got the body of the sine, but we've just cut off the peak at the top, and we've still got the nice tail out. So that looks quite good to me. So let's have a look at that on scope before and after. Actually, this was still turned on the whole time. It shouldn't matter too much. Turn it off. Okay, so Newfangled was actually doing quite a bit. Yeah, but that's the next step we move to anyway. Now we've added a little bit of tape saturation to give the sound a little bit more character. We then go into newfangled saturate in order to just chop these peaks off at the start, but leave these alone. So I'll just put it back to 0 and I'll start to hard clip it until we get a nice beefy looking kick that's got all this sub. Just pushing it a little bit too much there. You can get away with it, you've still got a lot of the sub, but this part has definitely been squared off a little bit too much, so I'm just going to take it back a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. That actually looks like a pretty good kick. So yeah, minimal processing. Each piece of processing here has its own purpose. Yeah, it's all doing its own thing. But overall, you know, that's a good looking kick. It looks all right. Let's have a look at it in audio. Looks pretty decent. We're still lacking a little bit of this transient sound, so maybe I could have turned up the transient for Serum, or you could just add in an extra transient. So I might play around with adding a little bit extra transient as well. Or what we could do is use oscillator B to make a transient in a slightly higher register. So this is getting a little bit more complex now, but let's add in another sine wave, and let's use LFO4 for the pitch again. We'll put it into unipolar mode, and I'll turn this down, and I'll use LFO4 for the pitch, LFO5 for the volume. So LFO4, let's get the volume right first. So again, just turn that to there. Envelope mode, BPM mode. Maybe down an octave. Really short. So if I play this by itself without the transient, without the body, it's just another transient that's doing the same as what this is doing, but it's just reinforcing that initial transient. And we've got LFO4 for the pitch, so let's do the pitch a little bit. Back to the volume of it, and then let's play it with everything. Oh, forgot to turn random off, so you can hear every time it plays, it's playing a very, very slightly different sample. It sounds slightly different each time. So without the random turned to 0, each one's a little bit different. Let's put the random to 0. Triggering exactly the same each time. So let's listen to it without oscillator B and with it. The phase is actually throwing it off a little bit as well. There's what do I have? Yeah, I've got envelope mode set to that and envelope mode set to that. So I need to put them both on envelope mode. And now it's sounding the same every time. So I'll just turn oscillator B on and off, see how it sounds. Sounds a bit better. I'll just take a look in scope, make sure we're not doing too much damage to the sub. Looks all right to me. And that's that. So that's cool. We can turn that down a little bit. How much overdrive are we now getting in trash? 10 dB. So by adding this oscillator B, we've actually increased the overall volume quite a lot, so that it's now driving into trash quite hardly, which is kind of giving it a very slightly distorted sound where the sub is playing off of the transient. So one way around this is I might just duplicate Serum, and I might label this one kick and second transient. And on this kick, I am just going to turn off oscillator B. And on the second transient, I'm just going to turn oscillator A off and the noise off. So this is just oscillator B now. And I'll just focus on the transient. And I can smash it a little bit harder, actually. In fact, I might do that. So let's. Yeah, some of that might sound quite good. Smash it a little bit harder on the hard clipper as well, maybe. Because as I said at the beginning, because the sound is so short, it's really not going to be detected by the human ear as audible distortion. But what we'll do is we'll just blend this into the original kick. One final thing that I might do is, because we've got quite a lot of low end information in this transient sound that we don't need, I may just take some of that off with an EQ. And if you want to get a little bit more in depth, you could even go to the the matrix and add, say, LFO6 to the global pitch. So it's global master tune. Turn it on one way. And now the transient, in this one, the second transient that we have, is going to be pitched as well, similar to the way we pitched the other ones. So I'll just use LFO6 to control that. Maybe back off some of the volume. And then let's turn that down, play our original kick, and start to blend in this second transient, see if it sounds good or not. Maybe a little bit too much pitch, so let's back off the pitch a little bit. Maybe increase the pitch. And okay. So yeah, that's basically a kick there. Another thing that you can do, I actually use 128s quite a lot. So I would just go to my drum samples, go to my kicks, and I will drag in a 128 of all my kicks. And what I'm going to do with this one is just pick a high layer that I can use to add some more character, because at the moment it's very synthy sounding. It's all been made in synthesizers, so it's very synthy sounding. Not much organic sort of live feel coming through. So what I might do is so this is just a 128 of my kicks. If you're interested in how I make these racks, I can go through a video of how I do that. But it's just all kicks, and I use this as a chain selector to pick which kick that I want to use. can be very useful when I'm trying to find kicks. And all I'm going to do is just high pass this kick. So I've got a high pass built in. So when I turn up this high pass, it filters every single kick in the rack. And I'll set it to around sort of 580 hertz, and then I will just scroll through some kicks and see if any of them stand out to me as a nice kind of toppy high layer. Maybe turn it down a little bit. And I'll turn the sustain down and try to get it to match the length of the other kick that I've got. And same as before, I just add a little bit of attack, so the attack isn't interfering with the transient that I've spent a long time getting correct. So I'll just add, I don't know, 15 milliseconds of attack. And then a little bit of a slope as well. Sounds pretty cool. You can you can go as deep as you want with this. So, for example, I could add some reverb to this top kick. Sounds pretty cool. So just to kind of show you how that might sound in a drum and bass context. And if I just group all of the kicks that I made, I can turn them on and off so you can hear how it sounds with and without. So yeah, I mean, it's not the best kick I've ever made, granted. I was taking a lot of time sort of just talking through, showing you how the process works rather than trying to get the end result of how to get the best kick. But that is effectively how I would work. And you know, you don't have to go as far as this. You can essentially stop when you get to you know, just add in a transient. but then you can go as far as you want. Like I could start processing this kick with like compression, you know, maybe a touch more distortion. So you can go as far as you want, but you know, there's a lot of producers out there that will literally just have a sine wave that's being pitched and perhaps a transient after there as well, and that's it, job done. That's their kick. So you don't have to add in, you know, these second transients and extra body and layers of tops. But you know, as I say, you can take it as far as you want. So yeah, I mean, I hope that was helpful. If there's any sort of videos that you'd like me to cover in future, let me know. Hit a like on the video, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you want to see. And you know, I'm thinking about doing some live streams in future as well. So if people want to see, you know, this in progress with less talking and more just kind of doing, you know, let me know. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it.